So this video is looking at just the start of unwrapping, UV unwrapping a simple object. So what we've got is this object here, so that could be a tyre or something like that. So we'll look at the best way of UV unwrapping this and organising the shells into our UV space. So ultimately, it's like a glorified cylinder. Literally, we'll start to look at breaking it down into the easiest shells that would be organised well enough to paint in a logical way. Now, the thing about UV unwrapping is ultimately, if you think about how you want to break the object down into easy panels to paint in Photoshop, then that's the majority of the work done. So ultimately, if this is a tyre, I've got the outside tread that runs around the circumference of the model, and then I've got this kind of plain back face, and then I've got this front face as well. Okay. So if I open up my UV texture editor and just zoom out, the grey area signifies my 0 to 1 space, and this is the area that I'm ultimately will export into Photoshop. This becomes the template by which I start constructing the textures. So as you can see with the object selected at the moment, I've got no UV, so let's have a look at UV unwrapping, and we'll essentially use planar maps and a cylindrical map as well. Okay, so first of all, let's UV unwrap the outside. Now the outside is effectively cylindrical, so the best way of doing this will be to use a cylindrical map. Okay, so ultimately, with UV unwrapping this kind of object, you need to start by selecting the faces. The easiest way with Maya now is if you click on a face, shift and double click the face next to it, it should automatically pick the loop. Okay, so that's the first one. I am going to include the ones to the side, so keeping shift held down as I select, which adds to the selection. Okay, if I control and left click, it subtracts, shift and left click adds. Okay, so that's a good way of adding and subtracting. Okay, so I selected all the faces there. I then just make sure I'm in the polygon submenu, create UVs, cylindrical mapping, and as you can see, I've got the icon for the cylindrical map, and at the moment it's kind of facing the wrong direction. So, and in my UV texture editor, I end up with this weird shape, which is not really great for painting textures. So let's have a look at organising that. Okay, so literally, I'm just going to close the UV texture editor. With the cylindrical UV icon still selected, in your channel box on the right hand side you've got something called horizontal sweep. So as you can see, the icon is only going half of a full circle, which is 180. So the easiest way is to type 360 and you can see that it's joined the full circle. I can actually grab these blue icons and move it, and you can see that it changes the horizontal sweep. So ultimately, I just find it easier to type in 360, and you're guaranteed that is a full cylindrical. So the next thing to do is we now need to rotate it on its side. At the moment the cylinder for UV mapping is kind of going vertical, whereas we want it laid on its side. So the thing to get to the to change the translation or rotation of the icon is you can see this little red T. It's quite awkward, it's quite subtle, so what you need to do is just make sure you click the T and then you get the transform. Okay, so you can see you've got the scale and the move. Now to get to the rotate, can you see this blue circle? You just click on that and it then exposes your rotate icons. Okay, so I just want to rotate it, it looks like it's in the Z. So as I rotate it in the Z, in the channel box you can see that the numbers are starting to move, so I'm just going to lay it on its side by 90 degrees. Okay. If then you go to your UV editor, you can see that that is now nicely laid out, and I'm just going to move it to the one side. You know, feel free to use all aspects of your UV texture editor. This is kind of your working area. You can get the shells. These sort of individual areas are called shells. Kind of get them going. Make them as best you can. This is your work area, and then when you're ready you can move them into your final layout later on. Okay, so that's the cylindrical. Now we're going to do a planar map straight onto each side. Okay, so shift and double click doesn't work with this, so just anything that comes to a point, it doesn't seem to accept the double click for selecting a loop. Okay, so that's selecting the back face. Just make sure you've not got any other faces selected, so that's just the back face. So what I'm going to do now is create UVs, go to planar mapping. This brings up the dialog box, and ultimately, as you can see from the icon, that direction is in the X. Z is running this way and Y is obviously running up and down. So the best way of projecting onto this plane is using the X and apply that. And as you can see, that's applied it quite nicely to that surface. I'm just going to close that, and that's the shape I get in my UV texture editor. So let's just move that to one side, and then literally now we can select the other faces. Okay, so rather than double click each one, I'm just going to try and go side on, select window, select everything, and using control double click to again deselect a loop. So that's kind of, you know, just other ways of selecting. Okay, so that's that area selected, and again, if I just look at what the best way, again that's in the X, so I need to go create planar map. Again, just, you know, it keeps your last selection, which is the X. Apply that, close that down, and then just again move that out of the way for the time being. Okay, so now I've got all the shells laid out. I've got the kind of tire that literally is a strip that runs all the way around the outside, and then I've got the back face and the front face. So right click, keep it held down, and that brings up the menu to select the UVs. So I can window select the front, and then I can scale them down. So literally, once you've got the shells organised, it literally is a case of trying to get them to fit as best you can in that 0 and 1 space. So I'm just going to slightly move it down. The idea is not to have any wasted grey space. So I can either window select around the whole shell, or literally if it's quite awkward to select the whole shell, just select one UV and then go select shell, and it converts that single selection into the full shell. So this is again with scaling, just make sure that you uniform scale, make sure that center is yellow, and that should then uniform scale. So this is the front of the tyre is the most important. So I'm going to make that the largest, and this back area, again select shell, is ultimately on the inside of the wheel, so it's not so critical. It doesn't need as much texture space, so I'm going to sacrifice that, make it a little bit smaller. You know, the majority of my texture I want on the front and the tyre, so then it just becomes this little jigsaw. So as you can see, you know, because you've got 3 UV shells, there is a little bit of wasted grey space, but that's okay, that's inevitable. You kind of mix in the jigsaw as best you can to fit in this square, but there is going to be a little bit of wasted space. But that's a pretty good layout, so you can now UV snapshot this, take it into Photoshop and organise your photos.